Hello and welcome to Manipil, and welcome to what come to think of it, I haven't checked, but I think it's part five of my deconstruction of Tim Baynes' lecture series on the problems of other minds. And I might kick off by saying that I'm sort of a bit. It's been a while since I did the last part of this, and I might have lost a few threads in this. And if something if I'm repeating myself or I have lost a few threads in this, okay, so please bear with me, right? There's, it's been the Christmas holidays and New Year's thing and this, right? And I've done the Stephen Molyneux thing also. Um, and to be honest, this is not the type of presentation that really gets my juices flowing, right? So it's sort of, I feel that the idea of the problem of other minds is very important aspect of metaphysics, and I would really like to get a grip on how these philosophers approach this. And I would say that for an idealist, which in order to have some label on myself, then idealism would be the closest thing, right? But I don't think I necessarily is a full-blown idealist, in the sense that uh, if idealists are talking about metaphysics as that which is beyond experiences, then I am not on board with what they're saying, right? That everything is mind or something like that, along what Bernardo Kastrup says. Then I'm rather a dualist, where I don't have access to one part in this duality, right? Okay, but the reason why there is this problem, or there is a reference to a problem of other minds in the first place, is because of bad metaphysics, right? It's because of materialism or physicalism, whatever the term you want to use, implies that you should be able to answer, or you should be potentially able to get to an experience of mind, you would say, right? And it gets convoluted into the mind body problem and the heart problem, and everything seems to converge towards this problem of, okay, if I'm a materialist, which basically people are that by default, so to say, most of materialists, right? It's I would say it's basic because they haven't contemplated the paradoxical nature of their metaphysics, and they haven't understood what the alternative could be, right? So they're sort of hooked on this. They are hooked into this thinking because they can't see any other avenues, right? And there's sort of a lack of scrutinization about their own thinking, right? In my opinion, right? And I'm talking from own experience, so to say, right? Or own kind of thinking, own philosophy. So this is why it's a mandatory thing for people to deal with in materialism or materialist philosophy, or philosophy arriving from a materialist foundation, right? It's sort of, they have to deal with this because it seems like there should be an answer available because of this faulty metaphysics. And as I said, idealists would say, well, yeah, you can ask the question, but you can never get to the answer. That's at least what I would say, right? So it doesn't really matter. I don't care about the question because I can't get to an answer. So why the hell will I care about the question, right? I can't get to other minds because my mind is not in contact with other minds, right? In my philosophy, so it doesn't matter because I can't get to it. So it's it's a kind of one of these questions that is on the borderline of answering, and that's very important to get to that delineation where there are, when you reach a certain point, you could say, to stay in this kind of linear thinking, maybe, right? That at some point you can no longer answer questions, right? Because the answers are beyond the reach of your experience, you could say. And if they're beyond your experience, then it doesn't matter what the answer is because you can't get to it, right? And that's why I like to understand how they think they can get to these kinds of answers. And it's also interesting that the ability to the foundation of bad metaphysics is what ultimately must be the thing that they think enables them to get to some kind of answer, right? So it's sort of a double up. It's bad metaphysics that indicates there should be an answer, and therefore they will go and look for the answer, right? So it's almost like it's double up bad philosophy, this, right? And that's why I'm sort of curious about it. Okay, let's head back in. We are about the 12.5 minute mark, so we should be getting back into the point where I left the last time. So let's do it.
From analogy. This is an account, a response to the problem of other minds, the skeptical problem of other minds that's associated with the writings of J.S. Mill and Bertrand Russell. Although some have argued, for example, Janice Thomas, that Mill's view, at least, was closer to the other account that we're going to explore shortly, the inference to the best explanation account. At any rate, whether or not Mill endorses the argument from analogy, the view is certainly clearly presented in his work. Here's the basic idea. Because certain forms of behavior are, in my own case, closely associated with consciousness, I'm justified in ascribing consciousness to other people when they too produce those forms of behavior.
So this is based on association, right? So when people have, water running down their face, it's because they're sad, right? It's an association. It's not an experience, right? You haven't experienced something, but it's rather an evidence or considered evidence towards something you do not have access to, right? So it's this gray area of, if I can pile enough, it seems to me, I'm just, taking this head on as soon as I can, right? It seems to like we are very quickly going into evidence towards that. And if I can pile enough evidence on top of it, lo and behold, all of a sudden, I can claim and I basically have knowledge of somebody else's experience, right? Now, this is sort of a path that I would never venture into, right? Because that is violating the foundational dichotomy created by materialism, right? And you could say my approach also, because I have the dissociation between my experience and that which is beyond that experience, right? So I'm still in the dichotomy, but I'm not saying that my experience is the actual outside. That is completely crazy to me, right? So it's this, I am cut off, I would say that any materialist is supporting, right? You have your experiences and then there's something outside your experiences, right? They are basically working from the same dissociation. And then they attempt somehow to use this inner experience to get to that which is beyond that experience. Now, this is stillborn from the start, right? It can't be done. It's a paradox. It's a contradiction, right? No matter how you turn it around, you can't stand in your bucket and lift it up too, right? You're never going to do that. No matter how you do it, right? And no, there's no cheating, right? You can't get somebody else to lift you or something like that, right? and this is sort of it's never going to fly. This he's apparently premature here maybe, right? But he's going to use evidence as proof, right? And that's exactly what he can't do, because that's the thing he's trying to get away from, basically. So he can't use that he's trying to get away from to use it to prove it, right? So let's see.
The argument can be run at the level of the generic property of being conscious, or it can be run at the level of more determinate properties, more determinate kinds of conscious states, such as being perceptually conscious, having bodily sensations, or even particular kinds of perceptual experiences, seeing yellow, seeing a glass in front of one, having conscious pain, for example. One way to think of the argument from analogy, and the way I'm going to think of it, is that it's really an inductive argument from a single case. If you like, it's a one-shot induction. I'm the single data point. The data point is, in my case, there's a correlation between certain kinds of behavior and certain kinds of conscious states, certain kinds of behavioral dispositions. And given that data point, given that one-shot data point, that single case, the thought is, I'm allowed or I'm licensed to make inferences about the conscious states of other people based on their behavior. Now, over the years, and as my introductory comments indicated, it's a long-established response to the problem of other minds, going back to at least to the work of Mill. The analogical arguments come in for a lot of criticism. Some of these criticisms, I think, are reasonable. Many of them are quite strong. Others, it seems to me, have less force and can, I think, be effectively rebutted. Let me begin with some of the criticisms that I think are not so strong and not so worrisome. First, some people argue that behavior is not uniquely associated with particular experiences, and that a single kind of behavior can be associated with multiple experiences, and that this undermines the argument from analogy. I'm not sure that it does. It's certainly true that behaviors are...
That's exactly the point I was getting to before. Why does it follow that just because that I have water running down my face, that I am sad? I could be an actor. I could be a liar, whatever, right? I could be lying. I could be, I've just, cut some onions or, right? If that you cannot get to this one-to-one connection because you are cut off from that connection you're trying to establish, right? And you can't do it statistically. You can't do it. There is no way. However much you want that to be, and say, okay, in this case, there is, when this happens, it means there are minds, right? It's simply impossible, because in order for you to know about minds, you have to experience mind, right? If you cannot experience mind, you cannot solve the problem of other minds, right? But that doesn't mean you can't consider them to have minds, right? You don't have to experience the mind in order to consider them having minds. But considering having minds doesn't entail that you know that they have minds, right? If I can't experience the Eiffel Tower right now, right? That doesn't mean I can't go or attempt to go visit the Eiffel Tower, right? I know that I can experience the Eiffel Tower, and that is different from trying to experience mind. But if, let's say, I couldn't get to the Eiffel Tower, I could possibly... maybe that's a bad analogy, right? I'm trying to come up with a good analogy, and that is difficult because there are no analogies here, right? But yeah, if I don't know whether or not a person is likely to kill me or wants to kill me, right? I can still consider that they want to kill me from my own reasoning or rationalizations, right? What would stop? Why should I not? Why would there be any reason for me not to do it? Or other than, yeah, well, you can't prove it and therefore you can't think that. Yes, I can think that. I don't need to experience their potential wanting to kill me in order to treat them as if they want to kill me, right? So it's, what is actually the purpose of trying to get to solve this problem of other minds? Is it that you want to have this square cut insight into what people think? Right? Yes, it's all evidential, in my opinion. And you use that evidence as best you can in your kind of rationalizations and your philosophy. But you cannot get a knockdown insight into the actual experience of other people, right? It's never going to fly. So it's like, what is actually the purpose here? Wouldn't it be better philosophy to just say, no, you can't get to other minds because you're cut off, and you would understand that if you understood that idealism is a better approach to metaphysics, that you can't get to the answer, right? But that doesn't mean you can act as if you had the answer, right? You can't blame others that you're going to do it this way, but nobody should tell you that you couldn't do it. I mean, you shouldn't take that seriously. That, what I'm trying to get at is, if you decide to treat a person as if they want to kill you, that's fine with me. That's rationalization. And actually, you would want to think along these lines, right? That's what I mean by, if you have a slightly, ethical approach to this, then when we're going further down the line, right? That which you cannot have knowledge about, which is other people's incentives, right? You would like to have some kind of, tool or principle to follow in order to deal with that aspect that you can't get to other people's thoughts, right? So wouldn't it be good to have some kind of approach to this? And one approach is that if I think you're going to kill me, I'm going to act as if you're going to kill me, right? That might not entail that I'm going to kill you because I think you want to kill me, right? That's not what I'm saying, right? It might be that I'm just going to not interact with you, or trying to hide from you, or, whatever, right? It depends on the principle, right? But you are the one who has to come up with the principle, right? You can't just take somebody else's principle. I mean, if you agree on the foundations of their metaphysics and the axioms they're working from, the definitions they're working from, you might end up agreeing with whatever principle they have come up with, and you're saying, I agree with all that philosophy, and I'm going to follow that principle. But you can't just be handed a principle like the tablets of the Ten Commandments and say, go do this or not do that, right? That doesn't work because it's not based on philosophy, right? It is based on mysticism. So this is it is much more important to deal with what are you going to do with the situations where you do not have a knowledge, right? The metaphysics is that which tells you this is the end station of where you can have knowledge. If you want to go further than this, you no longer have knowledge, and you have to come up with, you don't have to, but I would say it's a good idea to come up with an idea of how are you going to handle that situation where you do not have knowledge, right? That's what's important, and that's why it's sort of a different twist on the problem of other minds, because I think it's important exactly because you cannot get to it, right? And what do you do in that situation? Because knowledge can no longer guide you, right? It's something else that has to guide you. And you have to come up with that, right? And these are the difficult aspects of philosophy. And it's also where it starts to become personal, right? It's like, I have to do it myself. I have to think for myself. This guy is not going to help you, I bet you, right? He's just going to attempt to say, hey, yeah, I have piled enough evidence now. Now I know there's a mind in there. Done, right? Bullshit, man, right?
They're not uniquely associated with particular mental states, that there can be a one-to-many mapping from behavior to, as it were, mental states, conscious states. Here's an example. Suppose you see me run from my house. I might be running because I believe that my house is on fire and I want to escape from it. I've got these conscious thoughts, conscious belief, conscious desire to escape from, believe that my house is on fire.
Yeah, then you're sort of escaping from an idea of what is going on. You're not, right? It's all interpretations, this, right? Interpretation land is not knowledge land, right? All interpretations are not knowledge, because they are an interpretation from knowledge. And they might even be an interpretation of abstractions or cognitions or whatever, right? It depends on how you define knowledge, and that's why it's very important to do epistemology. And it's also, it seems to me, borderline that he is basically not really doing much metaphysics here, right? He seems to be taking a lot of things for granted. And it's very fluffy, this, right? It's sort of, oh, somebody's saying this and somebody's saying that, but I might think I might be pointing in this direction, slightly more in that. It's very fluffy, right? It's not sort of, okay, this is what I'm going with. This is the definition. It's not this sort of clear-cut philosophy. This is polemic, in my opinion, right?
Just
So far, at least.
conscious desire to escape from it. I might be running because I'm trying to get help for someone who's injured. I might be running simply because I'm exercising. Similarly, even forms of behavior that are closely related to particular conscious states, such as crying, which is, of course, closely related to experiences of pain, can, in context, be associated with other kinds of experiential states.
As I pointed
Crying's
out.
not just associated with sadness and pain, but can also be caused by, correlated with joy. So the worry here is that if a single type of behavior can be associated with multiple, perhaps indefinitely many mental states, how could inferences from behavior to mentality ever be justified, let alone underwrite claims to knowledge?
It can't. If you're seeing somebody crying, you have knowledge of them being there. And you may consider whether or not the water running down on their face is a kind of knowledge. Now, if you're classifying it as tears or rain, or that might be different, but you are conceptualizing it at least, and you are cognizing it maybe to some extent, right? So it might depend on your definition of knowledge. But crying and sadness and things like that, those are purely interpretation, if it's not your own sadness. And you might even be in doubt whether or not you're sad or happy, right? Right? It's like, how would you categorize your own experience, right? But since you're alone with that experience, it doesn't, it's like, it's up to you to, and nobody else can influence it other than their sophist attempts maybe, right? So you're alone with that, and fine, that's your problem. It's not my problem, right? You deal with your emotion and so on, right? But this step between he's trying to, and he's basically shooting himself in the foot here, I think, right? But he's actually being, decently rigid about it, right? He's not trying to fool you so far, though he's very fluffy, and it's sort of, it's very wordy, this, right? I would like it to be much more strict and much more to the point, in order to make sure that the viewer doesn't think I'm trying to fool them, right?
I think the response to this objection involves recognizing.
And I'm not saying that he's trying to fool, but the more fluffy you are in your approach, and the more you it's a matter of interpretation of words and so on, the more it's likely that I might consider it an attempt at fooling me, right?
That the interpretation of behavior doesn't rest on a single narrowly defined item of behavior. Instead, we make inferences based on behavior to consciousness holistically, on the basis of the target's overall behavioral profile, where this includes what they're doing now, what they've done in the past, what we think they might be doing in the future, and their environment. If that profile...
And yet we still might be wrong. And we can never get to whether or not we are right or wrong, right? No matter how close we think we are to that mind thing, right? So he's still he is trying to move slowly towards mind without taking big steps, and he's trying to slowly approach it, right? And I guess that there's something to that, but I'm still very cautious that there might be some leap somewhere. I'm just I'm focused on that leap that is potentially going to come, right?
Is consistent with a number of interpretations, as it sometimes is, then it may be the case that no single interpretation of that behavior does in fact yield knowledge. We might look to a person's context in trying to figure out whether their emotion that's responsible for their tears is joy or sadness or pain. And if the context doesn't disambiguate, if, for example, in many cases it does disambiguate, we might see that they're injured. That would seem to strongly suggest that they're in pain. We might see that they are at the airport greeting loved ones after a long absence, which would strongly suggest that they're happy. But if the context doesn't disambiguate, then it simply might be the case that we don't know in that kind of context what kind of conscious state the person is in. So we appeal to context, we appeal to the overall behavioral profile, we appeal to the environment in which that behavior is manifest. And that is perfectly appropriate. And we're still dealing, I would argue, with an argument from analogy, because the structure of the inference, the fundamental structure of the inference, is a one-shot induction. It's based on how I would feel.
Argument from analogy? I'm not sure I think that's good. The argument from association, behavior association with mental states, that I think that's a better term, right? Analogy is something different. It's like metaphor or something. I don't like. It's just my personal, opinion, right?
Where I'm producing those behaviors in that particular context. The second objection is that the analogical account can't deliver knowledge because it involves a one-shot induction, a single case. It's an inference from a single case. And the thought goes, one-shot inductions never underwrite knowledge. As people say in discussing the problem of induction, you need lots of data points in order for induction to really provide good evidence for a hypothesis. That's what's standardly said in teaching a problem of induction. And it's certainly true that one-shot inductions can be poor. I mean, suppose that I suffer from migraines after eating blueberries, and I know that you've just eaten blueberries. Would that give me a good reason to think that you too are suffering from a migraine? Well, surely not. I might happen to be right. Maybe you are, in fact, suffering from a migraine. But surely I don't know that you have a migraine merely because I've seen you eat blueberries. But the skeptic might continue. The blueberry argument, as we might call it, is no worse than the ordinary descriptions of consciousness as the analogical account conceives of them. Let's put the problem another way. The problem is to explain why one-shot induction can ground knowledge of other minds, given that it doesn't seem to do so in the migraine blueberry case. I think there are two ways of developing this challenge. One way to go is to say that one-shot induction is never rational. It never yields knowledge. And in his recent book on the problem of other minds, Tense Bees and Shell-Shocked Crabs, Michael Tai seems to go in this direction, suggesting that we have to reject one-shot induction to core. It's also a position, the rejection of one-shot induction is a position that's often encountered in conversation, I've found. The thought here is that in order for inductive arguments to be knowledge-generating, they really need to be based on a large sample, and certainly n of 1 is not acceptable. There is a challenge here, I think, but it needs to be carefully formulated. In my view, the problem isn't with one-shot induction as such, for it seems to me one-shot induction can yield.
Oh man, right? I get this sort of growing impatience with this, right? I feel he's been going around the same polemic, no real philosophy here, right? For more than an hour now, right? This is lecture 2, right? We are on the past the 60-minute mark, right? He's not gone any further than what he started to say an hour ago, in my opinion. It's like, who the hell is paying this dude for doing this, right? Who the hell would want to finance a guy like this? Right? If, let's say, there's a completely free market, there's no government, there's no academia in the way we understand it, that people should be forced to pay for guys like this to go and be a professor or whatever they are, right? But somebody is, by their own free will and their own free interaction and financiation, paying this guy to do whatever it is he's doing. Now, with that view in mind, who the hell would want to finance this, right? Why would you finance it? Unless, of course, he does it in his spare time and he's self-financed. Fine. I mean, I wouldn't. Fine, do whatever you want, right? But who would want to, be a beneficiary of this philosopher, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's necessarily bad philosophy what he's doing, but his presentation of his philosophy is absolutely boring and I'm looking for a particular word. I was going to say meatless, but it's without. There's no. It's like a skeleton without meat on it, right? There's nothing there. It's dusty and boring, and there's no. He's trying to be completely inoffensive and no sort of hard line. This is the definition, or anything like that, right? He's trying to sort of even like to numb you, sort of bore you into maybe, okay, I give up. It's so boring. Okay, I accept. Man, right? That's the notion I get, right? I wanted to be straight up and in my face and say, okay, this is the way I'm thinking, right? These are the big conclusions of this, right? And it's a very prevalent thing I have with these kind of academic philosophers. They are very often in trying to be inoffensive, you could say, right? They're trying to not be very sort of, this is the way it is, right? I'm not saying you can always be like that, but there must be some point where you reach a point where you say, okay, now I'm going with this, right? I'm stating this axiom, like it or not, right? You can like it or you can't like it. If you like it, let's go on, right? Walk a mile with me, right? Or leave it, right? There has to be some line in the sand somewhere, right? And it's very often the case that these are, and this exactly the same notion with Keith Frankish. It's like you are being, wrapped in cotton. You're being wrapped in a smooth, inoffensive language that potentially could, sort of groom you and, have a, slightly the nose under the tent. But it's not offensive. There are no hard lines anywhere, sort of, right? I would rather have it straight to my face and then I can say yes or no, rather than this sort of weak-ass, lame beta male kind of, right? Oh, man. Who would finance this unless there's some other agenda that it works towards, right?
Knowledge. I mean, here's an example. Suppose you've examined only one female wombat and you've observed that her give birth to live young. You've got a single case, one female wombat. But although n equals 1 in this case, it would, I think, be reasonable to conclude that female wombats in general give birth to live young. I think it would be perfectly reasonable to take seriously, and maybe even to think that a general hypothesis about the reproductive capacities of female wombats. Whether or not one-shot induction is warranted depends on how the property in question is distributed in the relevant population, or perhaps depends on how one believes the property in question to be distributed in the relevant population. One-shot induction, I would argue, can generate knowledge, or at least reasonable belief.
Induction can generate knowledge, right? Now they are sort of sneaked in through the back door here, right? Inductions can generate knowledge as soon as they use the terms like true or knowledge or things like that, right? Knowledge, what is that based on? Is it based on empiricism or what? He hasn't defined these things, right? So he's trying to circumvent, he's bringing it in through the back door here, right? He's trying to circumvent, he's sort of a magician in a sense, right? While you think that the story is this simple story and he's sort of numbing you with the boring language, and then all of a sudden, in came knowledge there, right? Knowledge just sort of appeared out of nowhere. And this knowledge is the conclusion of a huge set of philosophy called epistemology. And it has never been settled, in my opinion. There is no consensus of what entails knowledge, right? I might have my ideas, but there is no official, any kind of consensus, right? Justified true belief. People are still working, trying to, think whether or not it's justified true belief or not. And that was Plato 2,000 and more years ago, right? Can yield knowledge. Seeing a wombat having birth can yield knowledge. And it's also this fluffy term, can, but does it? Well, who is it up to? Who's deciding whether or not this is knowledge or not, right? Now this is an interesting point, right? this tells me that he's trying to fool you, right? He's trying to manipulate you with words. He's trying to sneak in knowledge through the back door in a discussion of something that I would consider more metaphysics than knowledge. And he needs, if he is going to appeal to knowledge, he would have to have settled all of metaphysics, in my opinion. And I have stressed this so many times when I'm deconstructing philosophy. They are blurring the lines between metaphysics and knowledge in order to fool you, right? They want to connect the dots to get to some conclusion that they want to be concluded. So they're just going to throw around words until they get what they want, basically, right? And the only one who can tell whether or not they have actually achieved this is whether or not you can see whether or not you have been fooled or not, right? If you just go along, you're basically encouraging them to use sophistry and manipulation to get to the conclusion they can't get to, right? You are the sort of the police of whether or not these people can claim what they can claim. So this is a big one, right? One-shot induction can yield knowledge. You can't induce knowledge, right? It's absolutely out of the question. This is where he will try to violate you, right? He will induce his way to other minds. And also claim it to be knowledge of other minds, right? Which is the problem of other minds. It's the problem of knowledge of other minds, you could say, right? But it has to stem from a metaphysical foundation. He can't just step over metaphysics and jump into epistemology as if everybody knows what the metaphysics is, right? No. There is no consensus on metaphysics either, which should be obvious, right? So he has spent an hour throwing fluffy words at you, and now sort of he is, oh, it can yield knowledge, right? It's just like, ooh. People have spent more than 2,000 years thinking about knowledge and metaphysics, and he's just saying, that's a wombat. It can yield knowledge, right? Oh my God. Don't fall for this bullshit, right?
When dealing with properties that are highly correlated, such as being a female wombat, having the capacity to give birth to live young. Obviously, it can lead one astray when dealing with properties that aren't highly correlated in a population, such as eating blueberries, having a migraine. So what we really need to know in order to know whether one-shot induction is reasonable in the case of other minds is to know whether the relevant properties are highly correlated. In other words, what we need to know is when it comes to adult neurotypical human beings, is there a robust correlation between behavioral responses on the one hand and states of consciousness on the other?
But you are trying to connect things where you don't have the opposite, because if you can't say that you can establish a connection between mind and behavior, if you're trying to prove that you can have access to mind, you can't use that. You are begging the question here, I think, right? You are trying to establish, because you have some mental picture, that there is a mental picture there, and then you're looking at their behavior and saying, okay, because they eat blueberries, they have the same. It's all inferences. You can't get to it with inferences, right? Then just say that these are inferences. They are not knowledge. They are not access. They're still a problem of other minds, right? So he's sort of blurring the lines with what we're doing here, right? And it's taking him an hour to get to this point where he's sort of starting to say, okay, I'm going to try to establish a direct correlation, or maybe even causation, right? It shouldn't be correlation. A correlation is not causation. Wouldn't you need causation? Which has also been, criticized by David Hume, for instance, right? For good reasons, in my opinion. Now is it not that you have correlations or what, right? Such correlations, right? So correlations is not causations. So even if he can establish correlations, he hasn't established causations, has he? Right? Because a causation is one, when this is the case, this will happen, right? And it's only this that would happen, right? Otherwise, you can't say the causation, because If there are two possibilities, you can't know which one of them it is, and then it's not a causation, right? So it's already so fluffy, this, right? Be fucking careful with this, right? I'm not saying, I mean, this is just my approach, and this is my deconstruction. You can do your own, right? Do your own scrutinizing, right? But be fucking careful with these kind of people, right? They're just trying to connect the dots in the direction they want the dots to go, right?
If there is, or perhaps more carefully, if it's reasonable to believe that there is, then one-shot induction.
Is it reasonable? That's fluffy, right? Assuming that's fluffing, that there's such correlation is fluffy, right? So it's fluffy upon fluffy upon fluffy, right? Maybe he should change his name to Fluffy Baynes rather than Tim Baynes, right? Tim Fluffy Baynes, right? I am known as Fluffy. My name is Baynes. Fluffy Baynes, right? Oh man, it's reasonable to assume that there are correlations, right? Fluffy upon fluffy upon fluffy, right? I'm not buying it. Get the fuck out of here, man.
Based on one's own case might yield knowledge or at least reasonable belief.
And I just want to point out again that I'm not saying that you can't decide for yourself that I'm going to go with when you eat blueberries, you get whatever, right? Fine. But don't tell me that you know it, right? Don't tell me that you just because you decided to infer something that can be upgraded to knowledge, because it can't. Because in order to do the inference, you needed to have knowledge of something else that is not the thing you're claiming knowledge about, right? So you can upgrade some other knowledge to point to something inferential knowledge, right? It must be of something of lesser character than knowledge, and then is by definition, it isn't knowledge, but purely an inference, right? So, okay.
In the way in which the study of the reproductive practices, the reproductive capacities of a single wombat might yield knowledge that applies to all wombats.
Yield knowledge? What the fuck is your definition of knowledge, Mr. Fluffy Baynes, right? Why don't you state that at the beginning? You are using a very, very, very important term here called knowledge, right? And if you're going to use that term as some kind of tool to get to what you want, right? You need to fucking describe what kind of definition you have of knowledge. Because otherwise I'm going to treat this as bullshit. Just outright, right? Yielding knowledge? How do you get to knowledge? Please state that, right? Please give me a fucking, crystal clear and sharp definition of what you mean by knowledge, right? And if it's sharp, it can only be sharp and crystal clear if you have made a crystal clear and sharp definition of your metaphysics, right? Otherwise, it's just a compounding of definitions, and then you lose any idea what you mean by knowledge in a series of weird definitions. So this kind of midstream philosophy, it sucks, man, right? And why would anybody in the right mind do this kind of philosophy? It's suckness, right? It's only because he needs to do a thing like this in order to uphold his professor wage, right? He has to go and do stuff like this. And somebody in his university told me, hey, you better go out and, hey, I saw Keith Frankish, that dusty old philosopher. He has done something with Moscow Center for Consciousness. Why don't you contact them and ask if you can do something about the problem of other minds? So you can sort of, warrant that you are actually, show some gratification about what's the term I'm looking for, that warrants you should have this kind of professor wage, right? This is not about giving you good philosophy, man, right? Oh, anything but.
So, is there a robust correlation between behavioral responses on the one hand and experiences on the other? At least
arguably, yes. Okay, so he is sort of presupposing the answer, right? It's arguably yes. You better think yes, because that's what academia has already academia says so, you better do it, right? Your masters are telling you, arguably, yes, right? So you should get to this conclusion. Fuck off, man.
At least when it comes to neurotypical adult humans. Well, here are 3 factors to consider. First,
neurotypical, is that another word for not crazy people or something like that? People are not crazy.
In one's own case, in my own case, there is, it seems, a pretty strong correlation between experience and behavior.
Again, pretty strong, right? Pretty robust, right? It's sort of these half-ass arguments all the way, right? It's sort of half-ass arguments for an hour now that try to, numb you into accepting, okay, I guess he has a point, right? I don't buy it, right? I don't buy this, right? And I think that I there's fucking 6 lectures here, man. Oh my fucking God, man. This is the tool, right? They make it so fluffy that you possibly cannot refute the arguments that might be in there, right? They can always say, oh, yeah, but there's something in lecture 4 that you haven't considered, right? Or then you go and listen to lecture 4 and you find that in minute 33, then you said something, yeah, but that's because you didn't understand in lecture 1. You're running around in circles here, right? If you can't present this simply in half an hour, I don't buy the shit, right? You're just out to, confuse me in order to make me unable to refute your point, right? It should be crystal clear and almost like, a null hypothesis, right? If this is the case, you can disprove it by arguing this or that or the other way, right? It should be close to that so that it's sort of clear what we're doing and where you stand. And if you say, I'm just working from an inference, state that you're working from an inference, right? And stay with that. Don't try to throw around words in order to upgrade it to some kind of, I guess it could be considered knowledge now, right? Fuck off, man. It's manipulative. And it's sort of a big fucking dump on decent philosophy, in my opinion. If you sort of just pretend that there has been some kind of consensus of what you mean by, for instance, knowledge. There isn't, and there hasn't been, right? It's stupid. So I think I'll leave it here, right? At the minute 23. So I'm really. It's even worse that Keith Frankish, and that was a big one to swallow, right? This is absolutely borderline, total boredom for me, right? And I was prepared that this was not going to be, something that was, engaging, right? This is, oh man. Can you make a presentation that is more boring than this, right? I guess you possibly could, right? But it's close to the most fucking boring presentation you can almost possibly imagine, right? This is sort of someone who seems like he's almost half dead, right? He's sort of mentally dusty, and there's no passion there. There's nothing there. There's nothing left. It's just, I guess I have to sit here for 6 hours and just drone on with fluffy language and, fluffy upon fluffy, right? I'm not buying it. Okay. See you in the next one.